What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're jumping into Destiny 2 with some news in the form of This Week at Bungie, and they do have a pretty juicy one for us today. They speak about the return of Trials this weekend and Trials Labs, and then a massive list of changes coming in the December update. They talk a lot about weapon archetype changes, and a whole bunch of exotic weapon changes that are coming as well. So there are some nerfs and buffs to talk about, and then we've got a couple of other things from TWAB to round up in the video. So, as always guys, I hope you enjoy this one, but now let's get into it. And initially Bungie say ahead of Transgender Awareness Week, which celebrates the lives of the transgender and gender non-conforming community from November 13th through 19th, we're proud to announce our new Trans Pride emblem, Be True. You can see the emblem on screen right there, with a code to redeem it on bungie.net. And they say additionally during the month of November, all profits from the sale of the Bungie's Pride pin will benefit the Trans Lifelines in support of their efforts to provide peer support to trans people in crisis through respectful, anonymous and confidential communication and resources. So bear that in mind as well, and the relevant links will be in the TWAB. But moving on to gameplay stuff, Trials of Osiris is returning this weekend, and we are going to be getting Trials Labs. But we're going to be getting Capture Zone Trials, which of course we saw a few weeks back. And they say this time around they're using a stronger Trials map, Endless Vale, and rather than rotating through points that give one team a significant location advantage, we're rotating through 3 neutral zones, one at Temple, one at Mid, and one at the Shrine. And additionally, players no longer get super energy when capturing a zone, either before or after the round ends. So that's Trials for this weekend, and of course card-based matchmaking is back, and the Flawless Pool will return on Sunday morning at 10 AM. There'll also be a 2x Trials rank booster all week long, so it's going to be a good time to jump in now that Trials is coming back. Next though, Bungie immediately get into some updates that we're going to see in the December update alongside the 30th anniversary pack. And these pertain to weapons. Not only have we got exotic changes, but also some archetype specific changes as well as perk adjustments. And so we'll focus on the actual changes right here, because Bungie do give a bit of in-depth information. And so for Slug Shotgun PvE damage, the bonus is being reduced from 30% to 20%. However, they are giving Pellet Shotguns a 10% PvE damage bonus. So that's going to be good for a whole bunch of shotguns in the game. On top of this, Linear Fusion Rifles are going to see increased PvE damage by 10%. And so that's a flat damage buff for Linear Fusion Rifles, not one I expected to see to be honest, but hey, I'll take it, especially with particle deconstruction. And then for caster swords, they've reduced the heavy attack ammo cost from 8 to 5. That's a broad positive. And the say for bows, in Season 11 they bumped up damage by 10% versus rank and file enemies, and having seen this in game for a few seasons, it seems to be safe to nudge them up again. So they're increasing damage versus rank and file enemies by 10%. For sidearms and fusion rifles, they say due to an ancient data entry error, sidearm and fusion rifle projectiles were non-hit scan, and behind the scenes the engine does the math converting a projectile from non-hit scan to hit scan if it would cover a specific distance in one frame, so this would only occur running at 60 FPS or higher. And so to fix that, they're increasing sidearm and fusion rifle projectile speed from 999 to 9999, which makes them hit scan regardless of frame rate. Bit more of a technical change there, but another positive. And then they get on to exotic buffs, and so Vex Metaclass right here, they say they're reducing the aim assist stat by 25, they're reducing the linear fusion rifle mode aim assist cone scaler from 1.1 to 1.05, and it will now require 3 eliminations for a full overcharge instead of 2. That affects the Crucible of course. So primarily an adjustment to aim assist, but also getting the overcharged round will need a bit more effort in PvP. And then we have Fighting Lion, which they did preview a couple of weeks back, and they removed the multi-hit requirement, and so dealing any damage will grant the buff for the weapon, and they've increased the buff to the reload stat from plus 50 to plus 70, and so reload will still be slow if you miss, but if you land any damage, Fighting Lion will reload faster than it did before the nerf, and they've increased the buff duration to 7 seconds. So that's another broadly positive change for that weapon. Of course, Arbalist will now have intrinsic anti-barrier. That's going to be really useful. And for Sleeper Simulant, they're increasing the magazine size from 3 to 4, as well as increasing PvE damage by 6%. So yet another buff for Sleeper Simulant right there. May just tip the scales in its favor a little bit. It's good that so far we're seeing primarily buffs here. And for Soros Regime, they say dual mode receiver always made Soros a worse 360 RPM auto rifle, but fixing that isn't a straightforward stat bump. This may not make this mode dominant, but at least makes it do what it was intended to turn it into a high impact auto rifle. So dual mode receiver mode now grants the following in addition to its current effects, and you get plus 30 range as well as plus 3 zoom. The Cryesthesia 77K is getting a few changes. They say they're removing variable trigger completely, and it will now fire on trigger press instead of release. This will make it feel much more responsive. Additionally though, the charged shot has been moved to special reload, and getting a final blow with the sidearm enables access to the special reload. Additionally though, once the charged shot is fired, the weapon reverts back to standard sidearm mode, and this does not cost your entire magazine. And additionally, the charged shot can now cause an AoE which freezes AI and slows players. So some interesting changes there, I'll be curious to try that one out. There is also Leviathan's Breath, which they point out is fairly underused, and they want to make the Catalyst more interesting, so the Catalyst will now grant the Archer's Tempo perk in addition to its other effects. That actually could make the weapon quite interesting. And Whisper of the Worm is the next one, which they did tease a week or so ago. They say the original DPS King has fallen out of favour, with the delay before the damage buff kicking in making the weapon less usable in short damage phases, and optimal sustained damage requiring all critical hits but not sufficiently rewarding precision. So they're reducing the delay on activating Whispered Breathing from the Catalyst from 2.1 to 1.2 seconds. Additionally, White Nail's magazine refill has been changed, and it was 3 from inventory but now pulls 2 from inventory and 1 from thin air, and they're also increasing damage in PvE by 10%. So I think that could be a fairly exciting buff for the weapon as well. It's nice that it isn't just a damage change, but they're kind of adjusting the intrinsic behavior of the weapon as well. Also, Darcy is seeing changes, and they're reducing flinch, recoil, and accuracy degradation by 50% while Personal Assistant is active. Personal Assistant now has a 1-second delay before deactivating when off target, whereas it was instant before, and they're increasing damage in PvE by 20%. So on paper, we're looking at a couple of pretty good buffs for those two snipers. And then Malfeasance is going to see increased explosion damage by 50%, also a fairly interesting change that could be quite cool. And for Dead Man's Tale, they say we've seen the Scout Rifle's usage drop dramatically on console since the recent nerf, so we spent some time tuning it in a way that benefits controller much more than mouse and keyboard. And they're saying they don't believe the buff will improve the weapon much on mouse and keyboard, specifically touching hipfire with the Catalyst. And they're increasing reticle friction fall-off distance, which will have no effect on mouse and keyboard, and then it'll get less recoil, with a reduced effect on mouse and keyboard, and improved accuracy, also with a reduced effect on mouse and keyboard. So that's a pretty interesting one there, let us know what you think about it below. And the final few here, for the Heir Apparent Catalyst, they've reduced damage resistance against players from 75% to 25%, and of course it has been a little bit strong inside of PvP really. For Lorentz Driver, they've removed the ability energy regeneration on picking up a telemetry, so it'll no longer have that functionality. For Traveler's Chosen, it will now grant 10% ability energy per stack on activation, and it was previously more generous on low stacks, but less generous on high stacks, and the average amount for 10 stacks are unchanged. And they've reduced stacks granted on a Guardian defeat from 3 to 2. And then we get into changes for perks. So for Adrenaline Junkie, they say eliminations with the weapon can add single damage stacks or existing ones. Grenade eliminations will boost the stacks immediately to ×5, and they've lowered the duration to compensate for weapon activation. So it'd be cool to see what that looks like in game. And the Safe for Vorpal Weapon, a perk that grants 15% bonus damage against all targets, I'm going to use my heavy weapon on. This was a non-choice and it sucked the air out of the room for other damage perks. At the same time, it was failing its original role, which was giving players a reason to run a primary weapon against tougher targets. So before it was 15% damage on all weapons, but it's now 10% on heavy weapons, 15 on special, and 20 on primary. And there'll be no change to damage versus players in super. But probably most important right there is getting that 5% decrease in bonus damage for heavy weapons. And then for Whirlwind Blade, they've increased the number of stacks needed to hit maximum damage from 5 to 10. And for Pulse Monitor, they changed the threshold for activation from 90% health to 30% shield, and it now requires much less damage to actually trigger. So a mixed bag on the perk front. As always, give us your thoughts below. But also there'll be changes for mods. And for Quick Access Sling, they say the functionality has changed, and it did grant plus 100 handling, 0.9 ready, stow and aim down sights time for 0.4 seconds after running out of ammo, but it'll now get 0.9 ready and stow all of the time. And the change will also apply to the Swap Mag perk, as they use the same perk behind the scenes. And for full auto retrofit, they say they've seen plenty of requests for an accessibility option allowing full auto fire, particularly on fast firing semi-automatic weapons. And they say they have a settings option in the works for a season after Witch Queen, but have decided to put in a stopgap until they're able to actually ship it. So they've added a full auto retrofit weapon mod that enables full auto while the trigger is held. And this is usable on legendary hand cannons, sidearms, scout rifles, and pulse rifles, and it's unlocked by default for all players. So obviously that's going to be a pretty useful accessibility option, and it will be interesting to see how that mod could be used in general, right? And so there we go, guys, that is the TWAB for this week. Quite a lot of changes that I didn't necessarily anticipate right there. Safe to say there is a healthy list of adjustments for weapons. Primarily they're pretty positive, maybe a couple of favourite perks and things that have taken a bit of a hit, but otherwise I'm broadly looking forward to that update, and there will be other elements of the December update that we'll hear about soon as well. So stay tuned right here on the channel, guys, and I'll keep you posted with that info. If you've enjoyed the video today though, a rating below really does help us out. But otherwise, as always, I appreciate you tuning in, and I'll catch you all very soon.